Every time you have checked the clock today, every minute, every hour, every quarter past, you have been using a Sumerian invention, the 60-second minute, the 60-minute hour, the 360 degrees of a circle. All of them came from a city of mud-brick walls on a river plain 4,000 years ago, in a civilization that chose the number 60 because it could be divided cleanly by 10 different numbers. Their empire is gone, their language is gone, their gods are gone. The 60 stayed, a quiet place to fall asleep tonight, and to wake up knowing one small thing you did not know before. For now, settle in, let your shoulders soften, let the day fold itself away like a letter you do not need to answer tonight. Slow the breath, close your eyes when you are ready. There is no hurry. Tonight we will spend a long, slow day inside a Sumerian city, Ur, on the warm plain between two great rivers, 4,000 years ago. We will move through its streets, its schoolroom, its taverns, its temple courtyard, and finally home, as the city falls quietly asleep around you. There is nothing for you to remember. Let it move at its own pace. The pale, dry dawn comes slowly to Ur. It crosses the river first, then the long, flat plain to the east, then at last the great curve of the city walls. The walls are mud brick, almost the color of the dust they were made from, and they have been standing for centuries. A scribe is awake before the rest of the household. He sits on a reed mat just inside his courtyard door, holding a small unfired tablet between his fingers, feeling the cool weight of it. He is checking the time. He does this by looking, very simply, at the angle of the light against the inside of the courtyard wall. Not the precise angle a modern person might check on a wristwatch, the shape of it, the softness of it, the way it has not yet reached the lower step. From this he knows, more or less, what hour of the morning has begun. His hour is not your hour. It is shorter for one thing, or longer depending on the season. The Sumerians divided their day into 12 parts, and they divided their night into 12 more, which sounds reassuringly familiar, except that the two halves were not equal. In the long summer months, the daytime hours stretched out, and the night hours shrank. In winter they swapped. A summer hour at noon could be nearly twice the length of a winter hour at midnight, and no one in this city would have considered that strange. Time was simply the daylight cut into 12 pieces, and the dark cut into 12 more, and pieces of unequal size were not considered a problem. They worked with what the sun gave them. What is worth noticing, though, worth noticing now, 4,000 years on, is the number 12, 60, 360. Those three numbers came out of this city, and they outlived almost everything else about it. Sumer is gone. The Sumerian language is gone. Sumerian gods are gone, even their names half forgotten. But the small mathematical decision the Sumerians made about how to count, that small thing has survived. Every clock you have ever looked at runs on it. Every circle you have ever measured uses it. Every map's coordinates, every navigator's compass, every protractor in every school bag in every city in the world, all of them still count the way the scribe in his courtyard is counting now. The reason they chose 60 is unromantic. 60 divides cleanly by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. There are no awkward leftover fractions. Half of 60 is 30. A third is 20. A quarter is 15. A fifth is 12. A sixth is 10. For people who needed to share grain, share land, share water, share days of irrigation between farmers, having a number with so many neat halves was a quiet kind of wealth. It made arithmetic feel, on a clay tablet, almost tidy. You can rest with that thought a moment. The scribe is no longer thinking about it, of course. He has folded his small calculation into the back of his mind, and he is now turning the tablet in his fingers, the tablet that is the more pressing matter of the morning. It is a receipt, a list of items written in wedge marks pressed by a sharpened reed into damp clay. It records the arrival, yesterday evening, of a quantity of barley grain, 6 jars of beer, and 1 female goat, all delivered to the household of a man whose name is also pressed near the top. Most of the very first things the Sumerians ever wrote down look exactly like this. It is one of the gentle surprises of human history. When you imagine the earliest writing, the first time any human being on earth set marks down to outlast the moment, it is tempting to picture a poem, a prayer, a spell, a name carved into stone by someone who wanted to be remembered. But the truth, when archaeologists finally read enough of the oldest tablets, was much less romantic. The first thing humans wrote was the count of their sheep. The first thing humans wrote was a list of their grain. The first thing humans wrote was bookkeeping. Literature, story, hymn, those came later. Centuries later, in some cases, the earliest writing in Sumer was almost entirely administrative. Arrivals of livestock, distributions of garments, rations of beer for workers on the canals, lists of city officials, lists of professions which themselves are lovely to read, the donkey driver, the snake charmer, the singer, the gardener, the man in charge of the fish ponds, the cup-bearer to the king. The first poets had to wait their turn behind the first accountants. The scribe has finished checking the receipt. He sets it gently on a low shelf where the sun will not reach it, because if it dries unevenly the marks will distort. Beside it, on the same shelf, is a small object he treats with more care. It is a cylinder, about the length of his thumb, smooth, made of a dark stone, drilled lengthwise so a thread can pass through it. Carved on its outer surface, in low relief, are tiny figures, a king, a worshipper, a winged bull, and a few signs that read in cuneiform his own name and the name of his father. This is his signature, not a written name on a piece of parchment, a small carved cylinder of stone. He uses it by rolling it across the surface of a wet clay tablet, and the figures and the name leave a continuous impression in the soft clay, a tiny relief frieze that runs the full length of his rolling. It cannot be forged easily. The carving is fine, the stone is hard, and any attempt to copy it freehand into wet clay would show. To put your seal on a contract was, very literally, to roll your name across it. Almost everyone of any standing in the city carried one. They drilled them through and wore them on cords around the neck or pinned to a garment. They were objects of style. Sometimes the wealthy commissioned beautiful ones from skilled carvers, but they were also strictly functional. Without your seal, you could not seal a contract. Without your seal, you could not certify a delivery. Without your seal, you were, in the legal sense of the word, anonymous. 4,000 years from now, in the early 20th century, an English archaeologist named Leonard Woolley will dig into the royal cemetery of this city and find, among many extraordinary things, the body of a woman buried with great wealth in a stone-lined chamber. He will know who she was because of a cylinder seal pressed against her body, naming her Puabi. The seal will identify her after 4,000 years of darkness. It is a slightly remarkable thing that the very signature she used to sign for grain and copper would, after she was long forgotten, be the only thing that remembered her name. Outside, the city has begun to wake. There is the soft morning sound of donkeys somewhere down the lane, the clatter of a pot being set on a hearth, a child's voice briefly, then quiet again. The brick wall opposite the scribe's courtyard is now lit fully, a pale warm color, and a small line of sparrows has settled along the top of it. The smell of bread baking in a neighbor's hearth drifts over the wall, and beneath it the older smell of yesterday's mud plaster, still drying, still slightly damp. He stands, stretches, lifts his cylinder seal on its cord, and slides it over his head, where it rests against his collarbone. He picks up a small leather purse and weighs it briefly in his hand, the small clinking inside. The courtyard is fully lit now. The brick has gone from cool grey to warm amber. The air still has the night's softness, but you can feel it shifting. The day is beginning to weigh. A pigeon lands on the courtyard wall. It picks at a small grain. It looks at nothing in particular. Then it lifts again and is gone. From the back of the house, the scribe's wife is awake. She is not yet visible. He can hear her only moving. The scrape of a clay pot, the soft step of her bare feet, the slow rhythm of someone whose work begins, like his, before the rest of the household. A goat bleats once on the rooftop next door. A donkey complains briefly in the lane. A small child somewhere coughs and is quiet again. The scribe lifts the basin of water in the corner of the courtyard and wipes his face. The water is cool. It smells faintly of clay. He dries his face with the edge of his garment. He pulls the garment straight on his shoulders. He runs a thumb under the cord at his neck where the cylinder seal rests. He is ready for the day. The shadow of the courtyard wall has receded perhaps a hand's breadth across the floor since he sat down with the receipt. By the standard of his own city, he has lost not quite half a small hour. By the standard of yours, he has lost roughly 20 minutes. Both standards are correct. Both standards are using 60. This is what it is to begin a day in this city, to wake before the rest, to sit a moment in the cool brick courtyard, to check the slow angle of light, to notice without much thought the small mathematical conventions that hold your day together, the 12, the 60, the cubit, the shekel, and then to step out, the seal at your neck, into the lane. The purse contains silver, cut into rough small pieces. The pieces are weighed in this city against a standard called a shekel, a unit of about 8 1/3 grams. By the year his grandfather was born, the shekel had become the price unit for almost everything that mattered: a small house, a field of barley, the hire of a man for a season, a jar of olive oil, a cylinder seal of fine carving. The shekel was a weight, not a coin. Sumer was not yet using coins, but it functioned as money does, and contracts written in cuneiform from this period record the price of fields and houses and labor in shekels of silver with great precision: 5 shekels for a 30-cubit field, 2 shekels for a small house, 1 shekel for the use of a man's labor across a single season. The shekel survives in your world too, in a quieter way. The word itself is still used in a modern currency by a country not so very far from where the scribe is sitting. The weight has been forgotten, the name has not. 40 centuries of language have not quite worn it out. His purse is not full, it is enough for the day's errands. He steps out of his courtyard into the lane, and as the morning light settles further into the city's narrow streets, follow me a little further, because before the merchants begin to set out their goods, there is something else worth noticing. The merchant lane runs a long crooked line through the city, between mud-brick walls high enough that the sun reaches the cobbles only in narrow bars. By mid-morning, the lane is busy in a contained, careful way. Donkeys carry sacks of grain, men wheel barrows of fired pottery, women sit on reed mats with cloth folded across their knees. There is no shouting. The lane has its own rhythm, and the rhythm is older than most of the people walking through it. If you stop a moment near the corner where a copper merchant has set up his goods, you can see a row of small ingots laid neatly on a stone slab. The ingots are dull red-brown, some are shaped like rough loaves, some are flatter discs. Each is stamped with a small mark: the merchant's mark, the foundry's mark, or the seal of the city of origin. Copper in this city was the iron of an earlier age. It was beaten into knives, into nails, into spear points, into the long thin sheets that lined fine wooden boxes, into hooks and rings and small statuettes for household shrines. It came up the rivers from the north, or by sea from a place across the gulf called Dealmun, and a merchant who could supply it well was an important person. The ingots themselves arrive in this city the way most precious things arrive, by boat. The ships of Dealmun moor at the wharves on the river. They are unloaded by men who have done this work since they were boys. The ingots are wrapped in cloth and carried on shoulders. They are taken to the warehouses near the gate. From the warehouses the merchants collect them, and from the merchants they pass into the small stalls of the lane. A merchant who supplied it badly was, sometimes, remembered for that as well. There is a doorway, set a little back from the lane, plastered the same color as the walls around it. The doorway leads into a courtyard, and in that courtyard, in the early 18th century before the Common Era, a man named Ea Nasir kept his trading house. He was a copper merchant. He bought ingots from Dealmun and sold them on to local clients in and Lhasa and other cities of the south. He was, by all surviving accounts, not a popular man. We know this because of a single clay tablet, no larger than the palm of your hand. It is now in a museum in London behind glass, and the keepers of world records have formally recognized it as the oldest written customer complaint in human history. The tablet is roughly 4,000 years old. It was written by a man named Nani, addressed to Ea Nasir, and its contents are, depending on your sense of humor, either funny or quietly melancholy, depending on how you feel about the persistence of human grievance across 40 centuries. Nani had ordered copper from Ea Nasir. He had paid for it in good silver, weighed against the standard. When his servant arrived at Ea Nasir's house to collect, the copper produced was, in Nani's view, of poor quality, inferior pieces, mottled metal, not what had been promised. The servant raised the matter politely. He was, Nani writes, treated with contempt, sent away, told to choose any of the inferior pieces if he wanted them, or leave with nothing. Nani was a person of standing. He was being treated, in his own city, like a person of no standing at all. He had paid in good silver. He had received bad copper. He had been spoken to rudely. He was, at the time of writing, refusing to accept the goods. The tablet ends not with a softening of tone, but with a hardened one. From now on, Nani warns, he will personally inspect any copper ingot in Ea Nasir's house before paying. There will be no further trust extended. You can hear, between the wedge marks, a man whose patience has finally ended. What is even better, in a way, is that the tablet is not alone. When Sir Leonard Woolley excavated the area in the early 20th century, his team found Nani's tablet, and they found in the same room several others, tablets from named clients, none of them Nani. Each of them in its own way complained about Ea Nasir. A man named Arbituram had a grievance. A man named Appa had a grievance. Men named Ilsu Alatsu and Iliadanum had grievances. The tablets had been kept, all of them, in Ea Nasir's house, in the room from which he conducted his business. He had kept his hate mail. This is the moment when you read about it now, when the 4,000 years between you and Ea Nasir collapse to almost nothing. There is something so familiar in this. The merchant who knows his clients are unhappy and keeps the letters anyway, perhaps to sort them, perhaps to dispute them, perhaps from some quieter sense that he is being unfairly singled out. Whatever the reason, the tablets stayed in his house. The house collapsed. The tablets were buried for centuries, and then, very gently, they came back into the light. Only, a cylinder seal would have been pressed at the bottom of each. Nani rolled his name across the wet clay before it dried. So did each of the others. Their names, their fathers' names, their household marks, all of them carried in low relief in the same little frieze along the lower edge of the tablet. It is perhaps what makes the complaints feel less like documents and more like letters. There is a person at the bottom of each one, a person who chose on a given day to write down his anger. The same lane outside Ea Nasir's door is where another sight, less famous and more cheerful, would have been ordinary in the late morning. At the corner of two streets, on a low wooden bench, two men are leaning over a small inlaid wooden board. The board is rectangular. It is divided into squares, 20 in all, arranged in two rectangles connected by a narrow bridge. The squares are alternately plain and decorated. Small rosettes, eyes, geometric patterns, and the decorations matter because some squares are safe and others are dangerous. The men have a small set of wedge-shaped four-sided dice between them and a small handful of black and white pieces that they move along the board from start to finish. They are playing the royal game of The game is older by the time these men sit down to play it than most of the things in the city. The earliest known boards were buried in the royal cemetery here in sometime around 2600 years before the Common Era, over 4,000 years before anyone now living. Sir Leonard Woolley dug 5 of them out of the ground. They are made of wood, inlaid with shell and lapis lazuli and red limestone. They are beautiful, and somehow, on a quiet street corner of this city, they are also still being played, hundreds of years after the cemetery was sealed. Most extraordinary of all, and this is the part that when you first hear it, sounds as if it cannot be true. The rules of the game survived. There is a clay tablet written by a Babylonian scribe named Iti-Marduk-Balatu in the year 177 before the Common Era that explains how to play. It is the oldest written set of rules for any board game in human history. 2,000 years separate that tablet from the boards in Woolley's cemetery, and yet they line up cleanly. A modern curator at the British Museum named Irving Finkel used the tablet to reconstruct a playable version of the game, and people now play it again on phone screens and on wooden replicas in the same way the men on this corner are playing it now. You can hear faintly the dry click of a piece moving. The men are playing for small things. A handful of barley, a jar of beer for the loser to buy from the alewife around the corner. The stakes do not matter. The rhythm of the game does. One man rolls, the other waits. The pieces move slowly along the row of squares. The losing man laughs briefly at his own bad luck. They play another round. Beer in this city is sometimes itself a kind of currency. Workmen on the canals are paid partly in jars of it. Tavern keepers, almost all of whom are women by long custom, accept grain in payment, weighed against the standard. The later law codes of this region will fix the minimum quality of beer and the price you may charge for it, and the punishments for short waiting are severe. One law warns that an alewife who short waits her customers shall be bound and thrown into the water. The lane outside is full of people, but the laws still trickle into every transaction. Every jar bought, every silver shekel weighed, every cylinder seal pressed into clay, all of it threaded through with the same set of small old rules. The merchant lane has its own slow theatre in the late morning. A young apprentice wheels a barrow of fresh-fired pots past the doorway. The pots clink softly as the wheel turns. He does not look up. He has done this every morning since he was 12. A woman with a basket of dates on her hip moves carefully past the game players. Her sandals are quiet on the stones. She glances at the board. She does not stop. A stray cat threads itself between 2 stacks of grain sacks and is gone. At the next stall along, a maker of small clay figurines has laid out his work. There are tiny figures of gods. There are figures of dogs and cattle. There are votive figures, no larger than a finger, that a person might leave at a temple in thanks for a small kindness. Each is painted simply. Each costs a small piece of silver. The sun is high enough now to reach the cobbles directly. The lane has warmed. The bars of shadow have shrunk to thin lines. The merchants pull cloths over their goods. The buyers slow. A man comes out of Ionace's doorway. He has a small clay tablet in one hand. He looks at it once. He puts it away under his garment. He walks off down the lane without a word. He is perhaps the next nanny. He is perhaps simply the next arbitrum. He has the look of a man who has come away with a complaint already written in his head, ready to be pressed into wet clay later in his own courtyard when the sun has dropped. The clay is patient. It will hold whatever he chooses to press into it. The wedge marks will not soften. The grievance will outlast him. The two men at the game corner reach the end of their game. One of them, the loser, raises his hands and laughs. He turns toward the alewife's doorway around the corner. Now imagine following one of those laughing players home, away from the merchant lanes, into a quieter part of the city where work has a different rhythm and where the people doing it are very small. The lane narrows as you walk away from the merchant quarter, and the noise softens. The houses here are more closely set, sharing walls. Some are tall, 2 stories around their courtyards, and the walls are coated in fresh mud plaster that gives off faintly the cool, damp smell of newly laid earth. It is the kind of smell that does not have an exact equivalent in a modern city. It is the smell of a wall being constantly remade. Through one of the doorways, set a little back from the lane, comes a thin sound that is also unmistakable. Many small voices, chanting in unison, then breaking off, then resuming. They are reciting syllables, the same syllables, over and over. This is the Idaba, the House of Tablets. It is a school. It is perhaps one of the strangest places in the city to a modern listener, because it is at once entirely familiar and entirely foreign. Children at desks, a teacher walking the rows, an exasperated boy sketching in the margin. The desks are not desks. They are reed mats laid on a brick courtyard floor. The pens are not pens. They are sharpened reeds, each child's reed cut to fit his small hand. The paper is not paper. It is wet clay, kneaded each morning by an older student, rolled out flat into small slabs, distributed when the lesson begins. The children are very young. A boy who arrives at the Idaba is usually somewhere between 5 and 7 years old when he begins. The school is a school for boys, almost entirely, though there are scattered records across the centuries of women who were trained as scribes, and a few who became famous, including the priestess and poet Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon the Great, whose hymns to Inanna are the earliest poetry in human history that bears a known author's name. But for ordinary households, the Idaba is for sons. A scribal training is expensive. It is undertaken by families that can afford to lose a son's labor for years in exchange for the prospect of his eventual employment as a clerk in a temple, a palace, or a merchant's house. The little boys then sit on their mats. They are called the sons of the tablet house. There are perhaps 30 of them in this courtyard, ranging in age from very small, barely able to keep their fingers steady on the reed, to almost grown 15 or 16, working on long compositions copied carefully from a master text. The man teaching is called the father of the tablet house, and he is dressed in the long fringed garment of a high-status scribe. He has assistants, older boys, now apprentice teachers, who walk the rows and look over the shoulders of the smaller students. They are called simply the older brothers, and that is what they do. They teach the way an older brother teaches a younger one, sometimes patient and sometimes not. They sharpen reeds, they prepare fresh tablets, they listen to memorized lessons, they check for mistakes. There are specialists. There is a man in charge of Sumerian whose job is to enforce that no student speaks Akkadian, the everyday language of the city by this period, when in his presence. Only the older language of Sumerian, no longer the spoken language of the streets, may be used in his lesson. There is a scribe of accounting who teaches how to keep ledgers. There is a scribe of measurement who teaches the standard units, the grain, the shekel, the cubit, the row of date palms. There is a scribe of the field who teaches geometry of irrigated land. There is a man in charge of drawing. There is a man whose job is to take attendance. And there is in surviving records a man with the simple title, the one in charge of the whip. The whip is not a metaphor, a surviving Sumerian schoolroom satire, composed perhaps 1,000 years ago by the time these little boys are sitting on their mats, but copied and recopied by generations of students who recognize themselves in it. Tells the story of a single bad day in an Edaba. The boy in the satire wakes up late. His tablet is sloppy. He talks out of turn. He fails to greet his older brother properly. He speaks Akkadian in the Sumerian instructor's hearing. By the end of the day, the boy has been beaten, by his own count, 7 times. The satire is a satire, meaning it exaggerates, but the catalogue of offences and the pattern of responses are not invented. Discipline at the Edaba was, by the standards of any modern school, severe. Children were struck for sloppy clay. They were struck for poor posture. They were struck for the smudged corner of a tablet. They were struck for talking. They were struck for not learning. The trade of scribe was a privileged one, but the path into it was not gentle. Walk the rows. Look down at what the small students are working on. Most of them are making lentils. A lentil is a small round tablet, the size of a flat biscuit, made by rolling a lump of clay between the palms and then flattening it slightly. The teacher writes a single line at the top, a name, a phrase, a piece of vocabulary. Below it, the student copies the same line in his own clumsy version. The clay is wet enough to take corrections. When the student's copy is bad, the line is wiped flat and rewritten. When the day is over, the lentil is left to dry, and tomorrow it will either be reused or set aside as a record. Thousands of these have survived. This is perhaps the small detail that brings the Edaba most fully back into the light. You can go to a museum in any of several cities in the world and look in a glass case at a small clay biscuit no larger than your palm. The teacher's line is at the top in confident, clean wedge marks. The student's copy is at the bottom, wobbly, larger than necessary, sometimes pressed too deep, sometimes not deep enough, the strokes of the reed not quite parallel. You can see in some cases where the teacher came around and corrected the boy. You can see in some cases where the boy himself rubbed out his own mistake and tried again. The boy is anonymous. He has been gone for 40 centuries. His handwriting is preserved. There is something quietly tender about the lentils. They are small enough to hold in one hand. They are warm-colored. They are not heroic. They are not part of any famous story. They are simply the patient daily evidence that 4,000 years ago, in a courtyard in a city called a small boy was learning to write his name. He is no different in any essential way from a small child today learning to make the letter A. He had a teacher who watched him. He had older brothers who watched him. He had a father at home who hoped he would get it right. He occasionally got it wrong. Sometimes he was beaten for getting it wrong. He continued, what the boys are reciting now, in the chant that floats over the courtyard, is the standard list of professions, the same list, very nearly, that the scribe was looking at this morning on his receipt shelf, listing the donkey driver, and the snake charmer, and the singer, and the gardener, and the man in charge of the fish ponds. Generation after generation of small children in this city learned to write by copying that list. It is one of the oldest curricula in human history. Boys whose great-grandfathers had recited it as boys were now reciting it themselves, in courtyards their great-grandfathers had once sat in. The sun moves across the courtyard wall. The chanting rises, then breaks, then resumes. An older brother passes between two rows, leans down, taps a small knuckle against the corner of a wobbling tablet, and says something brief. The boy nods, draws his lower lip in, and tries the line again. Another boy, 3 rows over, has begun to nod off, head dipping, then jerking up. Another boy is using the soft edge of his palm to wipe out a mistake. Another boy is staring, faintly bored, at the small green lizard sunning itself on the courtyard wall above. This also has been happening for thousands of years. In one corner of the courtyard, an older brother is preparing a fresh batch of clay. He has a small wooden trough. He is mixing river clay with a little water. His hands move steadily. The clay turns in slow folds under his palms. He has done this every morning for years. Beside him, a stack of small flat slabs is drying in the slanted sun. Each is the size of a child's hand. Each will become tomorrow's tablet. A water jar in the corner sweats coolly. The shadow on the wall has crossed 3 more bricks since the morning began. The sound of the city outside the school is faint here. A donkey passes in a far lane. A pot is set down somewhere on a stone. A vendor calls something twice and is quiet. The school courtyard holds its own air, the way the temple precinct holds its own. A mother appears at the gate, briefly, with a small wrapped bundle of food for her son. She does not enter. She hands the bundle to an older brother, who carries it across to the boy. The boy nods, takes it, sets it down beside him. He does not unwrap it yet. He goes on with his line. The mother lingers a moment. She watches her son's small back. Then she turns and is gone. The father of the tablet house walks slowly past the rows. He stops behind one small student. He bends. He says nothing for a moment. Then he taps the corner of the boy's tablet very softly. The boy wipes the smudge with the side of his palm and tries the line again. In the back of the courtyard, there is a single older student, perhaps 15, working on a long composition. His tablet is twice the size of the small one's. He is copying a hymn. The hymn praises the moon god Nana, who watches over the city. The boy does not look up. His reed moves in steady, neat marks. He is one of the better students. He may, in time, become a temple scribe. A small wind moves through the courtyard. The reed mats stir. A single dust devil skips briefly across the bricks and is gone. The small students chant. They break. They chant again. They are tired, but they do not yet know they are tired. They will know it later, when the sun has dropped and the lentils have dried and the older brothers have dismissed them, and they will walk home across the warm bricks of the lanes and fall asleep almost before they reach their own courtyards. For now they recite the donkey driver, the snake charmer, the singer, the gardener, the man in charge of the fish ponds, the cup-bearer to the king. The patient old list moves through the air of the courtyard, and when the tablets dry, when the lessons end and the heat softens, the day moves on to the part of the city where the work tastes of barley. The lane opens as you walk further west from the Edaba into a small square. There is a low fountain at the center, fed by a clay pipe that runs from the household cisterns nearby. There is a date palm in the corner, very old, leaning slightly, and there is a doorway, painted a softer shade than the others, with a sheaf of barley and a small jar carved into the lintel above it. The jar is the sign of the alewife. She is a woman in late middle age. She wears a long fringed wrap, dyed a dusty red, and a wide silver band on her wrist. She is the sabbatum, the keeper of the tavern, the brewer of the beer, the seller of the cool jars of grain-rich drink that, in this city, are not a luxury but a daily necessity. Most of the taverns in Ur are kept by women like her. It is one of the trades that by long custom belongs to women, and it is a trade that gives them, by the standards of their society, considerable independence. They keep their own books, they contract with grain suppliers, they serve the beer, weigh the silver, hand back the change. They are also often the keepers of small loans and the discreet hosts of small meetings, which is one reason the later law codes of the region pay such close attention to them. In the cool of the front room, 2 of her customers are seated on a long wooden bench. Between them, on a low table, sits a tall jar of unfired pottery, wider at the bottom than at the top, the color of warm sand. A wet cloth has been laid over the rim of the jar to keep the dust out. From 2 opposite sides of the jar, 2 long reed straws emerge, slender, polished, each as long as a man's forearm. The two men are leaning forward slightly. They are drinking from the same jar. This is how beer is drunk in this city. The reason is plain when you look closely at the jar. The beer inside is not a clear lager. It is a thick, lightly fermented drink, full of suspended grain hulls and chaff, more like a thin porridge than the modern image of a drink. To get at the liquid below the floating grain, you cannot tip the jar. You insert a long straw threaded through the grain layer, and you draw the clearest drink up from the lower part of the vessel. The straw was, in fact, invented for this purpose. The drinking straw, in human history, is a beer technology. It came to the soft drink much later, almost by accident. The beer is nutritious. It is a soft, sweet, lightly alcoholic drink, made from barley bread crumbled into water with malted grain and dates, allowed to ferment for a day or two. It is everywhere. Workmen at the canals are paid partly in jars of it. Temple offerings include it. Children drink a thinner version, the hymn that brewers sing as they work, the hymn to the goddess Ninkasi, who watches over the beer jar, is one of the oldest brewing songs in human history. The alewife knows the hymn. Most brewers do. It was set down in writing perhaps 4,000 years ago, but it had been sung long before that, master brewer to apprentice, passed by ear in the warm rooms where the grain was being mashed. It praises Ninkasi for her skill. It praises the bread, the dates, the honey, the river water. It praises the jar itself. Modern brewers in the late 20th century tried to reconstruct it as a literal recipe and produced a beer that, by their own accounts, tasted faintly of dates and was champagne pale. Scholars now caution that the hymn was never quite a recipe. It was a working song, a poem, a prayer, but the working song and the poem and the prayer together are a snapshot of how beer was made, and they are unmistakably ancient. The two men on the bench are talking quietly. One of them is the player from the morning's game corner who lost, and who came around the corner, as the laughing loser always does, to honor his bet. The other is a stonecutter from the temple precinct. They are not in any hurry. The straw is between the lips, then released. A pause. The other man's straw goes in. They have been doing this for an hour, in soft conversation, and the level in the jar is barely lower. The alewife moves between them and the small back hearth, where another batch is fermenting. She wipes her hands on her apron. She trims a wick on the small lamp at the door. She weighs out a small handful of silver pieces from the morning's earnings against a smooth stone weight. The weight is a small carved barrel of polished hematite, the precise mass of a shekel, the same weight her mother used and her grandmother before her. She is, in her way, a businesswoman of the city. Her ledger is kept in her head mostly. Once a week she presses the week's small accounts into a wet clay tablet and dries it in the back room. The tablets accumulate slowly in a small wooden box under the bench at the back. She has a stack of perhaps 2 years' worth of weeks. She does not throw them away. They are not interesting to read. They are simply the patient evidence that the tavern has gone on, week after week, jar after jar, as long as it has. A woman from a few houses down comes into the front room with a small clay jar of her own and a small piece of silver in her hand. She wants beer for the evening meal at her own house. She is not staying to drink. The alewife weighs her silver, fills her jar from the morning's batch, covers the jar with a small cloth, and hands it back. The woman nods. The woman is gone. A cat from the lane has settled itself on the doorstep. It does not come in. It does not leave. It only sits, looking out at the lane. The sun in the doorway has moved one more brick across the wall, then another. The afternoon is steady. The afternoon is slow. There is no need to hurry it along. The later law codes of this region, codes written down in the centuries after this particular afternoon, will pay her sustained attention. They will set the price of her beer. They will set the standard for her grain weight. They will warn her severely against short-waiting customers. They will warn her even more severely against allowing conspirators to meet in her back room without reporting them. They will warn certain priestesses, under threat of death, against opening or even entering her tavern. Reading those laws now, you can sense both the centrality of the alewife's house and the slight nervousness of the lawmakers, the awareness that something so ordinary as a quiet beer jar at the end of a long day was also the place where the city, at its loosest, did its real talking. In the back room, behind the alewife's hearth, the next jar is fermenting under a clean cloth. The smell is warm and yeasty and faintly sweet, the smell of bread becoming something more interesting. Above the jar, on a high shelf, sits a small clay figurine of Ninkasi herself, hand-shaped, with the faint mark of her cylinder seal at the base. The alewife's mother gave it to her, and her mother had it from her own mother, and so on, 3 generations back, to a brewer who first set it on a shelf above her own jar in another, smaller house. The men finish. They settle their account. The loser hands over a small disc of stamped silver, light in the palm, and the alewife weighs it briefly, nods, and slips it into a purse. The winner laughs and claps the loser on the back. Both of them step out into the late afternoon lane. Picture the warm jar slowly emptying behind them, the sound of the alewife's wooden ladle stirring the back hearth, the light through the doorway turning amber as the afternoon thickens. In a city of 100,000 small kindnesses and small grievances, this, the sharing of a jar between 2 men who have nothing serious to say, is one of the smaller, kinder ones. It has been happening in courtyards much like this one for almost as long as the city itself. The afternoon settles further. The light through the doorway has begun to slant. The 2 men do not notice. The boatman in the corner has not finished his small jar. The alewife's daughter comes out from the back, briefly, with a small clean cloth in her hand. She wipes the rim of a jar that has been left on the back shelf. She sets the cloth down. She returns to the back room without speaking. The alewife herself, at the front bench, weighs out a single small piece of silver. She holds it on her palm a moment. She nods. She slides it into her purse. The back room of the alewife's tavern is cool and dim. 3 jars are fermenting along the wall. Each is covered with a clean cloth. The cloths are weighted at the corners with small smooth stones. The smell here is the smell of the brewing room. Barley, yeast, a thin sweetness from the dates, a faint warmth, almost like fresh bread. It is a friendly smell. On a low stool sits the alewife's daughter. She is perhaps 14. She is grinding malted grain in a small stone mortar. Her hands are sure. She has been doing this since she was small. The daughter will inherit the tavern. She knows this. Her mother knows this. The neighborhood knows this. The lintel above the door, with its barley sheaf and small jar, will not change when the older woman is gone. The trade will pass, mother to daughter, the way it has passed in this city for many generations. In the front room, a third customer has come in. He is a boatman from the river. He has been on the water since dawn. He sits on the bench. He says nothing. The alewife brings him a small jar of his own and a single straw. He drinks slowly. The afternoon eases. Outside, the lane has begun to hold its long shadows. A child's voice rises briefly somewhere. A donkey's bell. The slow scrape of a sandal. The alewife wipes the wooden bench. She does this not because it needs wiping. She does it because the work of the tavern is also the work of small steady gestures. The bench is wiped. The lamp wick is trimmed. The weights are set out. The small accounts are kept in her head and, at the end of the week, pressed in wet clay onto a small tablet she keeps under her bed. Now follow the listener's eye outward, beyond the tavern door, into the long, quiet walk home through narrow streets where the daylight has begun, finally, to lean. The walk home is slow, and the streets are kinder now that the heat is loosening its grip. The light is the color of beaten copper. The shadows have lengthened until they meet across the lanes. Children who were inside through the worst of the afternoon are out again, small ones near doorways, older ones running with sticks and small clay discs down the wider lanes. The donkeys are quieter. The dust in the air settles a little, slowly, the way dust does when the wind has begun to lay itself down for the evening. You arrive at a doorway like all the others. The doorway is set into a long blank wall. The wall is mudbrick, plastered, the color of the dust around your feet. There is no window facing the street. There is no decoration above the door. Nothing to suggest that the household inside is wealthy or modest, or that it has been here for 2 generations or for 10. The Sumerian house turns its back to the world. Its life goes on inside. You step into a small antechamber. The doorway turns sharply, almost 90 degrees, into a narrow passage. This is not an accident. The corner is there to break the line of sight from the street, so that anyone glancing in cannot see directly into the family rooms. It is a privacy device, 4,000 years old, and it works by pure geometry. A house in this city did not need curtains. The walls and the corner did the work. You pass through the antechamber and emerge into the courtyard. It is not large, perhaps the size of a small modern living room, open to the sky, with all the rooms of the house arranged around it. The floor is hard packed earth, swept clean, with a single drain at one corner that runs out under the wall to the gutter in the lane. In the center, a small low brick platform, where in winter a fire might be set. Along one side, a high shelf with a row of clay storage jars sealed with lids. Along another, a wooden bench, polished by years of sitting. In the corner where the late sun reaches, a basin of water for washing hands and faces and feet at the end of the day. This is the house. Almost everything that matters happens here. Most people in this city, if you asked them, would describe their house in terms of its courtyard. The other rooms, the bedroom, the storage room, the kitchen, the small altar room, are described as opening off the courtyard, the way petals open off a stem. The courtyard is the stem. It is also the cooling system. Hot air rises out of an open courtyard during the day, drawing cooler air in through the doorways of the surrounding rooms. In the evening, the brick walls release the day's heat back into the small open square, and the household sits there warm enough into the night. It is an architecture invented for the climate, refined over centuries, copied across the city. You can walk for an hour through Ura in the late afternoon and see the same house plan repeating again and again behind the doorways, the same antechamber, the same off-center turn, the same courtyard, the same pattern of side rooms. We know this not only because Sir Leonard Woolley dug the houses up. We know it because 4,000 years ago somebody made a drawing. There is a clay tablet found near the city of Umma, dated roughly 21 centuries before the Common Era. It is small. It would fit in your hand. On its surface, drawn in crisp wedge marks, is the plan of a house. The walls are shown as parallel lines. The rooms are labeled. The dimensions are written in cuneiform beside each wall. So many cubits wide, so many cubits long. The plan shows a courtyard at the center. It shows the rooms opening off it. It shows the door off-center, turning into the antechamber. This tablet is one of the earliest architectural drawings in human history. It is, when you see it, a slightly remarkable object, partly because it is so old, and partly because it is, in its own quiet way, the same drawing an architect might make today. It uses scale, it uses dimensions, it labels the rooms, it assumes the reader can imagine three-dimensional walls from the two-dimensional outline. The conventions of the modern floor plan are already there, fully formed, 4,000 years ago, drawn into wet clay by the unknown hand of a Sumerian draftsman. Inside the courtyard you have walked into now, the household is settling. A woman is grinding something in a small stone mortar near the cooking corner. Her hair is bound back. Her hands move steadily, without hurry. Beside her, a small boy is stacking flat, round breads on a wooden board. The bread is barley. It is the daily bread of the city, slightly coarser than wheat, slightly nuttier, slightly more sustaining. There are dried dates in a clay bowl on the bench, and a small jug of beer for the evening meal, and a covered pot of something that smells, faintly, of fish stew. There is also on the wall behind the bench a small niche, half a hand high. Inside the niche a small figure of clay, painted simply, the household god, not Inanna, not Enlil, not any of the great gods of the temple precinct. A smaller, more local figure with a slightly chipped hand. The household god watches over the courtyard. The household god is given a small offering of bread and beer at the end of each day, and the offering is left overnight, and in the morning it is quietly taken away again, and a new one is made. The smell of fresh mud plaster is in the walls. They have been recently recoated before the late summer rains begin, in the constant cycle of mudding and remudding that every house in the city undergoes. Mud is washed by rain, mud is patched by hand, walls bulge slightly, then are corrected, doorways settle, then a reset. A house in this city is never finished. It is continuously, gently, becoming itself again. The woman of the household has finished her grinding. She brushes the flour into a small clay bowl. She sets the bowl aside. She takes a clay jug down from a high shelf, pours a small measure of water into a wooden basin, and washes her hands. The boy who stacked the bread has gone to a different corner of the courtyard. He is sorting small painted stones into 2 careful piles. The stones come from the river. He has been collecting them for a long time. Some are dark, some are pale, some have a thin line of white running through them. He has, in his mind, a quiet system for what goes where. He works steadily and does not look up. A neighbor's voice drifts faintly across the wall. A man calling his older son in for the evening meal. The son answers, somewhere in the lane. The voices fade. From the small altar room at the back of the courtyard, the smell of an old offering drifts faintly. A piece of bread that was left there yesterday morning. A finger dip of beer. The household god has had his small attention. A pair of doves crosses high above the courtyard, slow, in tandem, on their way to wherever they roost. From a far corner of the courtyard, the soft sound of a small clay flute drifts in. It is the boy. He has put down the painted stones and picked up a small flute his uncle made for him. He plays a few notes. He stops. He plays a few more. The notes are not in any clear order. He is not really playing a tune. He is only making sounds, the way small boys do, when the day is slow and the courtyard is warm. The woman of the household smiles, briefly, hearing the flute. She does not look up. The walls have begun to lose the day's heat. The brick under the woman's hand, where she sets the jug back on the shelf, is no longer warm. The boy stacks the last of the breads and steps back. The woman finishes grinding. From somewhere across the courtyard wall, the next house, a child laughs briefly. A goat, tied near a far wall, bleats once, then quiet. The father of the household has come in. He is the scribe from the morning's courtyard, and his cylinder seal is still on its cord against his collarbone. He sets his small leather purse down on the bench, undoes the cord at his neck, and lays the seal beside it. He pours a cup of water from the basin and drinks slowly. The boy who stacked the bread comes over and stands beside him, not asking anything in particular, only standing there in the warmth of the afternoon. The scribe lays a hand briefly on the boy's head. The boy, satisfied, wanders off again to look at something on a high shelf. Across the courtyard, the woman has begun to set the food on the wooden bench. Bread, dates, a small dish of olives, a pot of fish stew ladled into shallow bowls, a jug of beer, cool from the storage room. They are not in any hurry. The evening in this household is a slow event. It will go on for some time. There will be small conversations. There will be small silences. There will be the small movements of a household that has done all of this many times before, and that finds in the doing a shape of its own. The woman lights the small lamp on the bench. The flame catches. It steadies. It throws a soft yellow light across the bread and the dates. A second lamp is set in the niche by the household god. The clay god is gently lit. His painted eyes look out at no one in particular. From the kitchen corner, the smell of the fish stew is small and warm. There is mint in it. There is a thread of date sweetness. There is a soft pull of the river underneath. The scribe lifts a flat round of bread and tears it. He tears it slowly, the way a tired man tears bread. He hands a piece to the boy. The boy takes it without looking up. He chews. The woman sits. She rests her forearms on her knees. She is tired. Her hands are quiet now. A gust of evening wind crosses the courtyard. The lamp flame leans. It catches itself again. The shadows on the wall move once and then settle. The boy drinks a small sip of beer from his small cup. He makes a face. He drinks another sip. His mother smiles briefly, without saying anything. The scribe looks up at the sky above the courtyard. It is the pale rose of early evening. The first faint star is not yet there. The sky is empty and large and soft. He lowers his head again. He goes on eating. A neighbor's voice carries faintly across the wall. A man calling in his goat for the night. The voice is calm. The goat answers, somewhere with a single short bleat. And so as the light leans further westward and the courtyard begins to soften into shadow, listen for the quieter creatures that share these walls. It is the time of day when the city's rhythm becomes smaller. The merchants have closed their stalls. The schoolchildren have gone home. The water carriers' last trips of the day are returning. And along the courtyards and the warm thresholds, the smaller life of the city begins to show itself, the life that is not human, but that has long made its peace with humans, and that has earned over generations the right to certain warm corners of the house. There is a dog asleep by the antechamber. He is a thin, tawny dog, rangy and low-bodied, with one ear bent. He is the household's. He has been here a long time. In the late afternoon he lies against the cooling brick of the inner wall, where the air is just beginning to stir. He sleeps with his nose tucked into his foreleg. The boy who stacked the bread comes by on his way to the courtyard, pauses, lays the back of one small hand against the dog's flank, and continues on. The dog does not stir. He only sighs, very softly, the way old dogs do when they are pleased to be noticed, but more pleased to be left. The Sumerian word for dog was It survives in cuneiform on tablets that have nothing else to say about dogs, only in passing that they were there. They appear on cylinder seals, walking beside their masters. They appear in lists of working animals. They appear in offerings, a votive figurine of a dog, made of clay, painted simply, left at a temple as a thanks for the recovery of a sick child. They appear also in a quieter and stranger place, under the threshold of the front door. It is a custom of this city, and of cities like it, that when a new house is built, a small clay figure of a dog is buried beneath the floor of the doorway, just inside the entrance, where no one will ever see it again. The figure is small, no larger than a fist. It is shaped roughly, sometimes elegantly, sometimes simply, and it is left there in the cool earth under the threshold to guard the house. When the house collapses centuries later, and another house is built on the same plot, the small clay dog is sometimes found again by the new builders, and is sometimes left where it lies, as if to honor the work it has been doing all that time. In later centuries, in cities further north, this custom would grow more elaborate. The small clay dogs would be made in matched pairs, then sets, then full litters, and they would be given names. The names survive on tablets: Catcher of the Enemy, Don't Stop to Think, Bite, Loud is His Bark, Expeller of the Wicked. The names are funny and a little fierce, and they suggest the kind of dog every household in every century has hoped its real dog might be, though the real dog is asleep, of course, with his nose under his foreleg, indifferent to the names. The dog by the antechamber is not named anything fierce. He is called only the Brown One, but he has, like all his ancestors and all his descendants, the same understood role. He sleeps near the door. He hears what comes. He raises his head when the wind shifts. He walks to the threshold to look. He returns to his place. He sleeps again. The household lives very simply around him. There are other small companions. In the corner of the courtyard, 3 small reed cages, stacked, hold pigeons. They are pets, and also, when needed, food. The pigeons coo softly to each other in the half-shadow. A speckled cat moves across a rooftop above, soundless. From the corner where the goat is tied, the goat chews and stares without expression at no one in particular. There is a small clay bird feeder set on the high shelf, where the household's woman has scattered a handful of barley each morning for the small wild sparrows that come down off the wall. There is a single tortoise that has lived in this courtyard for longer than anyone living in the house. He was here, the scribe's wife will tell you, when she came as a bride, and he had been here some years already by then. Children are playing near the courtyard wall. There are perhaps 4 of them, 2 from this house and 2 from next door. The next door wall is so thin that the children consider both courtyards as one larger one and pass freely between them. They have small painted clay animals, a horse, 2 dogs, a long-eared figure that might be a hare. They have a small wooden bowl. They have in particular a small stack of clay chips painted with marks, which they are using in some game whose rules they have made up themselves and may forget by morning. Their voices are low. They are not arguing. They are absorbed. A father returning home from the canal works passes them at the doorway. He carries his sandals in one hand. His feet are dusty. He nods at them and ducks through the antechamber. They do not look up. The youngest of them, a girl perhaps 4 years old, is arranging the small clay animals in a careful row, longest tail to shortest. The order matters to her. She corrects the position of the hare twice. Above the courtyard, the sky has begun to deepen. The first long swallows of evening are crossing it, not yet many of them, but the evening kind, slower, lower, looking for the next eaves. A few lamps have been lit somewhere across the lane, and you can see through the open doorway of another courtyard the low yellow glow. The dog stretches, folds his other ear, sleeps deeper. You can stay here for a moment if you like. There is nothing to see and nothing to do. The boy has finished with the bread. The woman has set the cooking pot. Somewhere out of sight, an older man, the scribe's father, who lives in the back room, has come into the courtyard and is sitting on the bench, watching nothing in particular, pulling absently at a worn thread on his garment. The light is the color now of dust suspended in still air. The smell of mud plaster is mixing with the smell of bread, and beneath both, faintly, the smell of the river, a smell you forget about during the day, when the city's noise covers it, and remember only when the city quiets. Across the city, in other courtyards, behind other doorways exactly like this one, exactly the same small evening is unfolding. Bread on a board, a pot warming, a goat bleating, a dog asleep, a child playing with a small clay animal, a father returning, the repetition of it, all over the plain, all across the river, all to the horizon, is one of the gentle facts of the city. It is not a city of one great life. It is a city of many small ones, repeated. The scribe's father, on the bench, has fallen quietly into a doze. His chin has dropped a little. The thread he was pulling at is still in his fingers, but his hand has stopped moving. The dog by the antechamber, hearing the older man's breath go even, settles his own nose deeper into his paw and follows him into sleep. The smaller creatures of the courtyard go on with their small business. The pigeons coo, the cat on the rooftop has gone, the tortoise, somewhere out of sight, moves 3 slow inches across a patch of warm dust, and then stops, satisfied. The girl arranges the painted clay hair into its proper place at last, and looks up briefly at the deepening sky, and then returns to her work. A small black and white bird lands on the courtyard wall. It tips its head. It flies away again. The smell of the cooking pot has become deeper. Onion, date, a thread of fish. The smell drifts slowly across the courtyard floor and up to the open sky above. A small dust devil skips briefly across the cooling bricks of the lane outside, touches the wall, and is gone. The gate of the courtyard creaks once on its leather hinge and is still. The boy who stacked the bread sits down beside the dog. He does not pet the dog. He only sits. The dog opens one eye. The dog closes the eye again. The goat in the corner has finished her chewing for the moment. She watches a fly. The fly leaves. She watches nothing. From the next courtyard, a low voice murmurs to a child. The voice is patient. The child does not answer. The voice murmurs again. A single moth begins to circle the lamp by the cooking corner. It is too early in the evening for many moths. This one is alone. A small lizard, the green one from earlier on the school wall, has appeared on this courtyard's wall too. He sits in a patch of cooling brick. He does not move. The smell of the courtyard is the smell of the day's labor settling. Bread, mud plaster, a faint thread of fish stew. the small dust of a sandal, the river beyond the walls. A small clay cup sits on the bench. There is a finger's depth of beer in it. The beer is still cool from the storage room. The cup is not for the dog, of course, and not for the children. It is for the household god in the niche, who will receive his small offering tonight, as he has every night, for as long as the woman has kept the house. A palm leaf, somewhere overhead, scrapes very softly against another. The wind has shifted, briefly. It will shift back. A second moth begins to circle the lamp. The first moth has gone. The smaller of the two next-door children has fallen asleep against the base of the wall, her head in the crook of her own arm. Her painted clay hair is still in her hand. Her older sister sees this and quietly removes the hair and sets it on the high shelf. The smaller one does not stir. The scribe's father on the bench stirs once, very slightly in his doze. His hand twitches around the worn thread. He does not wake. The oldest tortoise comes around the corner of the storage room. He pauses. He looks at the children. He withdraws into his shell briefly. He emerges again. He continues on. The lamp flame leans. The small lizard does not move. The dog does not move. The boy beside the dog does not move. For a long moment, no one in the courtyard moves at all. It is the small daily quiet that comes in this city between work and the night. It is what the small creatures wait for. It is what the dog has been waiting for in his sleep all afternoon. But behind that calm surface, as the day begins to fade, the larger rhythms of the city are also turning toward the great brick mountain at its center. The center of the city is dominated, even at this distance, by a single great shape. It is a shape made of brick, layered in 3 terraces, broad-shouldered, plain. It rises from the temple precinct, like a small mountain that has been built rather than grown. From a distance, in the dropping light, it looks almost the color of rose. Up close, in the morning, it would look the color of dust. At noon, the color of pale gold. At dusk, like this, it is the color of a copper kettle in firelight. It is the ziggurat, the great staged platform of the moon god Nana, and it is the highest thing for many days in any direction. You do not climb it. Only the priests of the moon climb it, and only at certain hours of certain days. You stand instead in the long open court at its base, with the other people who have come down at evening to sit a while in the cooling shadow. The temple courtyard is, in its plan, a larger version of the courtyard you stood in earlier, behind the mud brick wall of the household. The same shape multiplied, the same idea, an open square of sky surrounded by rooms, set apart from the streets outside by thick walls, entered through a single doorway with a turning antechamber. The architecture of the city you see now is one architecture. The same thought has been written in small brick at the household, and in great brick here, and in monumental brick at the ziggurat above. The same humans who carry their cylinder seals to the merchant lane, who weigh out shekels of silver, who let their dogs sleep across the threshold. Those same humans have built, with the same shape, a place to think about what is larger than themselves. The bricks of the ziggurat are not all of one age. The lower ones were laid down many generations ago by builders whose names are now lost. The middle terraces were relaid in the time of King Urnamo, 2 centuries back, who restored the platform after long neglect, and who had his own name pressed in cuneiform into bricks set deep in the structure. The upper terrace was redone again in the time of his son Shulgi, a modern archaeologist. Lifting a single brick from the great staircase, will sometimes find the king's name still legible across its broad, clean face, not signed exactly, but pressed in advance, while the brick was still wet, into every brick of the run, so that any restoration of the platform was at the same time a public memory of who had built it last. Inside the courtyard, the evening rite is beginning. A small group of priestesses is moving across the open square. Their long skirts brush the stones. Their hair is plaited under heavy cloths. Their eyes are rimmed in dark kohl, the same fine ground galena and herbs that the merchant's wife wears, that the alewife wears, that even the small children of the lentil school wear in lighter strokes, because everyone in this city has worn kohl since they were old enough to keep their eyes open. The priestess's kohl is heavier, more carefully drawn, and in the dusk it makes their eyes look very steady. From a far corner of the courtyard, very faintly, the sound of a stringed instrument begins. It is the sound of a lyre. The lyre is held in the lap of a seated woman, and the lyre is, though you cannot see the details from here, a beautiful object. Its sound box is wood, set with shell and lapis lazuli and red carnelian. At its head a sculpted bull's head looks out, gold-leafed, with a beard of dark blue stone. There are 11 strings, tuned with golden pegs, and the woman is brushing them slowly with the flat of her hand. The notes come over the courtyard in long, soft strokes, almost too soft to be sure you are hearing them. They are the kind of music that does not insist on being listened to. It simply sits in the air. This is what the lyres of sounded like, or as close as anyone now can guess. The instruments themselves, 4,000 years on, still survive, in pieces, in museums far from this courtyard, but the sound they made on this evening is gone, and the note in your imagination is the closest you can come. Imagine it. A small, slow chord, a pause, another chord, the bull's head looking outward, the priestesses moving slowly across the open square in front of the platform, the sky above the ziggurat losing its blue, gathering its amber, then its rose, then its first faint star. A priest has carried out a small stone bowl. There is barley in it, and a few dates, and a small cup of beer. He sets the bowl on the offering platform and steps back. The lyre plays on as if it had not noticed. Around the edge of the courtyard, ordinary people sit, some on low brick benches, some on the ground. They are not part of the rite. They have only come to be here in the evening, in the company of others. Some have brought a small loaf, a small jar of beer for themselves. They eat, they drink, slowly, through reed straws. They watch the lyre player and the priestesses without making any sound. The kohl-rimmed eyes of the priestess and the kohl-rimmed eyes of the watching woman across the courtyard meet briefly with no expression, and then both look away, equally calm, equally untroubled. The bricks of the courtyard wall are still warm from the day's heat. You can sit against one of them and feel the slow, steady warmth pressing back into your shoulders. The smell of the courtyard is the smell of brick that has been sun-heated all afternoon, mixed with the faint smell of barley from the offering bowl, and behind both the smell of the river that runs not far from the precinct's outer wall. A child somewhere across the courtyard is half asleep on a parent's lap. The parent has not moved. The parent's hand rests gently on the child's hair, with the absent steady stroke of a hand that has stroked many children's hair in many evenings, in many different summers. A small group of older men near another wall have begun to murmur to each other, not about the rite, but about a grain delivery, or a daughter's marriage, or whatever older men in the warmth of dusk find to murmur about. The murmur is too low to follow. It blends gently with the lyre. The light is going fast now. The top tier of the ziggurat catches the last of the sun, stays bright a moment longer than the rest, and then gives it up. The whole great shape becomes a deeper, softer rose, then begins to lose color altogether, becoming simply a darker mass against the darker sky. The lyre slows, the notes lengthen, then fewer notes between them, then a long silence. The bowl on the offering platform is left where it is. A small brown moth, lifted by the warming evening air, settles on the rim of the cup of beer, then lifts again and is gone into the dusk. The first true star has come out above the ziggurat, low to the south. A second is just visible, half imagined, near the first. The priestesses return to the inner rooms. The watching crowd, in ones and twos, begins also to drift. They walk slowly, the way people walk who have nowhere they urgently need to be. They speak, when they speak at all, in soft voices, the sound of a sandal on stone, the sound of a child being carried, sleepy, the sound of the lyre folding down somewhere out of sight. The strings sighed quiet. You can stay here a moment more, in the empty courtyard, with the sky overhead deepening and the brick still warm. The priest who set out the offering has gone back inside. The doorway he passed through is dim. A single low lamp burns in the antechamber beyond it. A small breeze comes off the river. It is cool. It moves the dust at the foot of the platform. It does not lift it far. The stones of the courtyard are warm to the touch. The wall behind your shoulders is warm. The brick under your hand is warm. All of it has held the day. A single bat, low, crosses the open square once, then again, then is gone. The last priestess to leave the courtyard pauses at the inner doorway. She looks back, briefly, at the offering bowl. She does not return for it. She passes through into the dim corridor. The air smells of brick and barley, and the faint smoke of a small temple lamp burning somewhere inside. It does not smell of the lane. It does not smell of the river. The temple precinct holds its own air. A small child, somewhere across the courtyard, has been asleep on a parent's lap for some time. The parent has not moved. The parent has the calm look of a person who has decided to stay still for as long as the child stays asleep. The second star has come. The third is just visible. They are very small in the sky above the great brick mountain. A night bird calls once, far off, then falls quiet. The lyre player has put away her instrument. She walks slowly across the courtyard with the small wooden case under her arm. She does not look up. She is humming very quietly, something that is not a song. The brick of the ziggurat above is now almost the same color as the sky. You have to know where it is to find it. A second priest appears briefly at an inner doorway. He is carrying a small clay lamp. He pauses on the threshold. He looks out over the empty courtyard. He turns back inside. A gentle line of warm light comes briefly through the inner doorway as he opens it, then is gone again as the door closes behind him. The courtyard holds its dusk. The air is the color of slowly cooling brick. The smell of the offering bowl mixes faintly with the smell of the river beyond the wall and the smell of the long brick mass of the platform above. A single bat returns. It crosses the courtyard once more. Lo, it is gone. The far edge of the sky is now a darker rose, almost violet. The first 3 stars are clear. A fourth is just visible, just at the edge of seeing. A small wind moves through the courtyard. The reed clothes covering the offering bowl ripple once, lightly. They settle again. The bowl is undisturbed. The stones of the courtyard have begun to give back the day's warmth, slowly into the cooler air. The brick under your hand is no longer hot. It is only warm. The last person in the courtyard, an older man, lifts himself slowly from his seat against the wall. He stands a moment. He brushes the dust from the back of his garment. He walks slowly to the antechamber and is gone. The courtyard is empty, and so as the sun lowers behind the brick mountain, the city's noise begins, very gently, to thin. The lamps come on, slowly, one by one. They are small clay lamps. Each is a flat little shape with a pinched spout, filled with sesame oil, with a wick of plaited reed laid into the spout. A small flame, no larger than a thumbnail. They are set in niches in courtyard walls, on shelves above benches, at the inside of doorways. From above the city, if you could rise just a little above the rooftops into the cooler upper air, you would see scattered across the long mud-brick plain a slow constellation of these small flames coming alive in private courtyards, then in lanes, then at the temple thresholds, then at the doorways of the alewife and the merchant and the scribe. There are 12 hours of night to come. That is how the city has counted time, all day and now into the dark. 12 parts of daylight, finishing now. 12 parts of dark, beginning, each part a little longer this season than the corresponding part of the day, each part beginning its slow, unhurried passage as the people of the city begin theirs, settling onto reed mats, pulling thin woven blankets up to their shoulders, blowing out the small lamp at the bedside, leaving only the larger one in the courtyard burning low. On the dark plain beyond the walls, the river is hushed. Its surface in starlight is a slow grey ribbon. Reed boats are pulled up on the banks. A few late herons stand in the shallows. They do not move. The river does not move much either in this hour. It only goes very slowly downstream, the way it has gone for as long as the city has been here, and longer. In the household courtyard, the woman has covered the cooking pot. The boy is asleep on a mat near the wall. The dog is asleep at his usual place by the antechamber. The small clay god in the wall niche has had his small offering, a piece of barley bread, a finger dip of beer, and the offering has been left for the night. Above the city the stars are coming. They are bright over bright in a way that any modern listener who has ever stood far from a city's light will recognize at once. The Milky Way, low to the south, the familiar shapes that the people of this city have seen for so long, they have given them names. The wagon, the field, the old man, the twins, names that in many cases will outlast Sumer itself and travel on in slightly altered form to other languages, other cities, until they reach you. Some of the stars you know by their modern names are still being looked at tonight by Sumerian eyes. Across the city, somewhere, a mother is humming. She is humming to a baby on her lap. The baby is small, perhaps a few months old. The mother is the wife of a junior temple scribe in a small house not far from the great ziggurat. She is not singing words tonight. She is only humming the shape of a song. It is an old song. It has been sung in this city for a long time. It was perhaps also sung to her when she was small. You can hear it very faintly on the edge of the imagination. A simple, slow tune, not in any modern key, not quite like any song you would recognize, but unmistakably the same kind of song that mothers everywhere, in every century, have hummed to the small ones in their arms. The lamps along the lane are lower now. Some have been blown out. Some have only been allowed to drop. The dog at the antechamber has not moved. The household god in his niche is in shadow. The grinding stone is quiet on its bench. The water jar at the corner of the courtyard is full. The bread on the board, what is left of it, is covered with a cloth. The city is going to sleep. You can hear it very faintly, not a sound exactly, a softening. The streets are emptying. The taverns are closing their doors. The merchants have long gone home. The scribes have set their reeds aside. The schoolchildren are asleep. The priestesses are within. The lyre is silent. In the household courtyard, the small lamp on the bench has begun to gutter. Its flame is bending. It draws itself tall, then small, then tall, then small. The wick is short. The oil is low. The lamp will be out soon, and the courtyard will be dark, except for the soft sky overhead, the stars, the very last fading rose against the western edge of the world. A breath of wind passes through the courtyard. The small palm leaves stir. The wind is coming off the river. It is cool. It carries, very faintly, the smell of mud and reeds and damp stone. Somewhere in the dark, a dog barks, once, then is quiet. The stars do not move. The city sleeps. Around the temple precinct, the great brick mountain has gone almost entirely into shadow. only its top edge picked out faintly against the deep blue of the sky. The lyre has been put away inside its small wooden case. The offering bowl is still on its platform. The small brown moth has gone wherever moths go, into the night. In the household courtyard, the older man on the bench, the scribe's father, has been gently helped to his bed in the back room. He is asleep before the blanket is drawn over him. The boy who stacked the bread is asleep on his small mat, one hand near the dog. The woman has put the last of the dishes away. The scribe has banked the small fire on the brick platform with a careful palmful of ashes, the way his own father showed him, the way he will one day show the boy. The last lamp in the courtyard gutters once more, then steadies. Lo, the wind comes again. The palm leaves stir again. A pigeon shifts in its reed cage and goes still. Across the city, in another courtyard, the mother who was humming to her baby has fallen quiet. The baby has gone to sleep. She is sitting with her hand still resting on its small back, looking at nothing in particular, her own eyes growing heavier. She lets her head lean against the mud-brick wall. She closes her eyes too. The lamps on the lanes are almost all out now. The streets of Ur are dark. The river beyond the walls is dark. The plain to the east is dark. The ziggurat is darker still, the shape of it only barely visible against the stars. The wind has lain itself down. The night is steady and cool and old. Somewhere far off, a single lamp still burns in a temple chamber. Inside, a junior priest has fallen asleep over a tablet. He had been copying a hymn. The tablet is still in front of him. The reed has slipped from his fingers. The lamp is low. This also is part of the city tonight. The scribe's wife in the household courtyard has gone to her bed. The scribe follows her a moment later. He pauses on his way past the wall niche to lay his hand briefly against the small clay god, then goes on to the inner room. The dog at the antechamber is asleep. The boy is asleep. The older man is asleep. The household is quiet. The last lamp in the courtyard goes out by itself. For a long moment there is only the sky, the stars over the plain, the faint silver of the river beyond the walls, the slow breath of the wind. The brick of the courtyard wall is no longer warm. It is only cool. The dust on the floor has settled. The dog has not moved. The boy has not moved. The older man in the back room has not moved. The woman beside her husband has not moved. A single late donkey, somewhere far across the city, brays once. It is a soft sound. It does not carry far. Another small star has appeared. The sky is full of them now. The night is not quiet exactly. It is full of small sounds. A reed mat shifting under a sleeper. A lamp wick collapsing into its small pool of oil. The faint stir of a goat in a courtyard. The soft fall of a date from a palm into the warm dust below. A night bird crosses the courtyard once, low. The dog at the antechamber lifts one ear. The dog lowers the ear again. The dog goes deeper into sleep. A pigeon shifts in its small reed cage. It folds its wing more tightly. It is still. The stars over the plain are very clear tonight. The river beyond the walls is a slow dark thread. The plain beyond the river is empty and quiet. There is nothing moving on it. There is nothing moving on the road that runs along its edge. The road has gone to sleep too. In the temple precinct, the lamp in the small priestly chamber has burned even lower. The junior priest who fell asleep over his tablet has not stirred. The reed has rolled away from his fingers and is on the floor beside his stool. The lamp will be out before he wakes. The great brick mountain stands quiet over the city. Its 3 terraces are no longer visible separately. They are one dark shape now, against the slightly less dark sky. The last small lamp, somewhere in a far courtyard, gutters and goes out. There is one fewer flame in the city than there was a moment ago. The wind off the river has settled. The palm leaves are quiet. The reed mats in their courtyards are quiet. The grain in the storage jars is quiet. The water in the basin is quiet. The bricks in the walls are quiet. A single small cricket begins, somewhere in the lane. It chirps 3 times. It stops. It chirps 3 times more. It stops again. It will go on like that, on and off, for most of the night, and no one in the city will hear it at all, because everyone in the city has gone to sleep. These sounds are not for you to track. They are only the ordinary breath of a sleeping city. You can let them happen without listening. The river beyond the walls has not changed. It runs the same slow grey ribbon it has been running all evening. The reed boats on its banks have not moved. The herons in its shallows have not moved. The river is doing the work that rivers do at night, which is no work at all. A single fish breaks the surface of the river. The small ring spreads. It fades. The river is smooth again. The sky is dark. The stars are bright. The city is asleep. Nothing more is asked of the day. Nothing more is asked of you. And in the deep, dry darkness over the city, all the small sounds of the day have folded themselves away. There is nothing more, just now, that needs your attention. You can let the city fade now. Let it pull back, slowly, the way the river pulls itself away from a bank when the tide is going. The mud brick walls, the narrow lanes, the small lamp guttering on the courtyard bench, the dog asleep by the antechamber, the boy on his reed mat, the woman covering the pot, the household god in the niche above, the stars over the great brick mountain. Let all of it move very gently away. You did not need to remember any of it. That was not what tonight was for. Tonight was simply a long, slow walk through a city that has been gone for a very long time, and had left in its silence a few quiet gifts behind. The hour that you used today to mark your time, the signature of a person who could not write your kind of letters, the small clay biscuit on which a small child practiced his name, the complaint of a man named Nenny about a copper merchant who deserved it, the sound of a lyre across a courtyard, the smell of mud plaster after rain. Small things, mostly small things. You can let those also go. Let your breath slow now more than it already has. Let your shoulders soften. Let the back of your neck rest. Let the warmth of the blanket settle around you, the way the warmth of the brick walls settled into the courtyards at evening. Notice how heavy your hands feel just now, where they are resting. Notice how the room you are in is, in its way, also a courtyard, its own small private space, set apart from the larger city outside, with its own quiet lamp, its own quiet door, its own quiet center. There is no hurry. There is nothing left of the day to attend to. There is nothing left of the city of to visit. There is nothing left of any place at all, just now, but this one, where you are. The lamp in the imagined courtyard has gone out. The fire in the imagined hearth has burned down to ember. The small lullaby across the lane has trailed off. The small dog has found his deepest sleep. So has the river. So have the stars. So, almost, has the night itself. Across 4,000 years of dust and silence and forgotten language, this city has settled gently into its sleep again. It has done so many thousands of times before. It will not need your help tonight. You can let it lie there on its plain, between its rivers, under its stars, and you can turn very slowly away. The blanket is warm, the pillow is soft, the room is quiet. The day, whatever it asked of you, has already been answered as well as it was going to be answered, and there is nothing left just now but rest. Let your jaw soften, let your tongue rest behind your lower teeth. Let the small bones of your hands rest. Let the small muscles around your eyes rest. There is nothing left to look at. There is nothing left to listen for. The city is far away. The city is also already gone. The dust of it is settled long ago. The bricks of its walls are warmed by other suns and washed by other rains. Its lamps went out 40 centuries before you were born. There is only the night you are in, only this room, only this breath. Close your eyes if they have not already closed. Slow your breath even more. The city is gone. The day is gone. The lamps are out. There is nothing more to hold. Sleep well.